Good evening, and welcome to CITI Media Reporter. I'm Howard Homanoff. Thank you for joining us this evening. My guest is Jessie, who is the co-founder of Brave Ventures, which we'll be talking about, was named the 2013 Social TV Marketer of the Year, which we'll also talk about, and also one of Multi-Channel News' 40 Under 40 to watch in the digital world. I've unfortunately lost my eligibility for that particular category. Jessie, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Thank you very much.
Let me start. We're in the, we've just come out of the blur of upfront, new front presentations from broadcast networks, cable networks, digital websites, et cetera, platforms. A couple of, and I know you've been in the mix of that. Give me a couple of quick thoughts on, sort of what you took away and kind of where you think that's going.
Sure. I think some of the key points that we really heard really focusing around audience understanding to drive new content creation, as well as data and insights. So pretty much everyone coming out of the new fronts, as well as the upfronts, really touted their strong move into the data world. How they're utilizing data, not just to better target ad opportunities, but also to inform their content. So you heard it across the board that content was still king. They had the premium content, but at the end of the day, it really is about the audience and who has the right audience so that you can glean the right data. So you're starting to hear this scripted approach from both the traditional as well as the new people that this is the way of the future for television, and it rang true with this new front and upfront season.
And you've been, having spent a good part of your career inside of the big media company, or
Yes.
one of the big media companies, NBC. How well do you feel that the reality of what's going on, and you can't, not every company is the same,
Yeah.
but the reality of kind of big media companies, folks in traditional television, being able to deliver on some of that promise of data?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think they're getting there. They're definitely getting there. You heard it with NBC Universal in their announcement about utilizing Comcast set-top box data. I mean, that's a huge move.
Yeah.
You also heard it from Turner and the way that Turner is doing their Audience Now targeting system, and really being able to target ad products across any screen at any time. I think we're getting to the point now where everyone is really understanding how to build their stacks. And by doing that, they're able to keep data, keep insights in-house, and really own primary data, which is at the end of the day is the most valuable type of data you can have, and are starting to put it into practice here. So we're getting closer. It's not fully there yet, but it's getting close.
Let me ask you about another kind of hot topics in the news, and I think you've had some reference to this on your website too. Yeah. Verizon AOL.
Yeah.
Again, maybe not from a dollars. There's a $4 billion roughly deal, certainly small in the scheme of the kinds of things we've seen from Google or Facebook, et cetera. But certainly seems to certainly resonates a lot in public discussion.
Yeah.
Kind of what's your, at least, immediate take on it, and what do you think it may mean?
Yeah, it's funny when you say $4 billion. Small. It was actually one of the largest ad tech acquisitions to date. I think it was the second largest. So it's still pretty large. But when you take the lens outside of it just being an ad tech play, from our standpoint, we think it's a win-win. One, for the ad tech stack that they have at AOL. So Verizon now basically not only owning the mobile pathways, the fiber pathways that they have, FiOS. But with AOL, they actually have a real ad tech platform. From adaptive all the way to the one platform that they have, they're bringing in a real system to be able to target that audience. So tying back to what we were just discussing before, it's all about the audience and being able to target them. But they also had, what's really interesting, the content play. So when you're looking at HuffPo and the understanding that you've got Facebook, you've got Google as the big video networks, at number 3 was AOL. So AOL has really become the masters of syndication of great content. So I think when you put those two things together, Verizon's making a really strong case to own an end-to-end short-form and long-form content system in which they own the pipes, they own the last mile, they own the ad tech and stack, they own content, the Awesomeness TV deal with Verizon, the NBCU deal with AOL. You start looking at how all these things are working together. and then you start thinking about AT&T and DirecTV and the moves they're making over there, you know, with Otter Media and Peter Chernan's group, you can start to see that everyone in the major media world is starting to get really smart about not just owning the pipes, owning the content, and then pushing it right to their owned audience.
So you seem pretty clear or have a different perspective than I've heard from some others, which is, oh, when it comes to the content, Verizon will just spin off the content, and this is only about the ad tech play. You see it as beyond that potentially Verizon itself, not just in a financial way, but as a company, can benefit or should benefit from the content piece.
I do. I mean, at the end of the day, it's, you know, you look at what Comcast and NBC Universal did. It wasn't just about, you know, great, we did an acquisition of NBC Universal, we've got great content, and now we're just going to end up spinning it off. You know, they had an opportunity to spin off NBC. NBC at the time of the acquisition wasn't exactly at the top of the heap. Yeah. It's got a lot of momentum now, and they did have an opportunity. You know, there were rumblings about it being spun off, but they didn't. And so again, I think that when you look at the value chain and being able to own content, not just, you know, borrow it or license it or take other people's content, you're able to keep a lot more of that margin. So at the end of the day, when you're reporting to the street and trying to create the best business model, you know, margin's going to speak louder than words.
And I think you said something very interesting too, which is this big push around big data.
Yeah.
That it isn't only about the kind of the audience advertising delivery side of it, but that link to the content itself. Mm-hmm. You know, so that maybe we're getting past we get 12 people in a mall in Encino and they tell us what we should watch, and,
right,
you know, for the season.
Yep.
There's a lot of rich other sources for the content, you know, driving the content itself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you know, basically targeting at scale. So we're at a point now where I think all the agencies are getting much smarter in regards to how they're targeting the right audience and where they want to target them. So they're still going to do their mass reach plays. You know, they're still going to buy on TV, but they're also going to be targeting the right audience that they really want. You know, getting down to the granular data, psychographic data, to make sure that they're getting the best ROI from their media spend.
Yeah. Well, let me ask, as in the litany of your experience, we mentioned the social TV marketer of the year. I'll start with an obvious. What's social TV?
You know, it's funny. I get asked that a lot these days, and I'm of the mindset, you know, where, you know, in my days at NBC Universal and pretty early adopter of social TV and the second screen opportunities, looking at the evolution of where television is moving towards, you know, social is now just an inherent aspect and foundational element of what television is, that social TV is television. The way that audiences are engaging. What was so fantastic about the early days of social TV were the aspects of everyone was viewing television in an isolated chamber in which, you know, you're on Twitter, you're watching your show, there's nobody around you, and everyone just thought, like, you're just watching Twitter, you're just on Twitter and you're watching your show, and that's social TV. And that's not true. That's one element of social television that talks about the real-time engagement. There's also the elements in which stories being told across social platforms, whether it's in concert with the show itself, 22 minutes or 42 minutes, or whether it's actually bridging episodes. So you look to the early days of Carlton Cuse and Lost and the way he built a story world around what Lost was. It actually networked blogs and message boards and websites to get an audience to engage with each other to continue the narrative arc of Lost. That is social TV as well. So now we're watching social TV go, it's really interesting to see the fact that it's just getting sucked into the process of television. So there are so many different ways you're watching television now, whether it's OTT or on your mobile device. One of the really interesting things that we're starting to see is if everything is going OTT and mobile and being driven by the Discovery platform, your phone, it's going to be very difficult to be sitting on the couch with your phone watching a show and tweeting at the same time. So that element of social TV may actually take a little bit of a decline because of the fact of mass consumption happening on the very device you need to be conversing on. So again,
so is that, not to interrupt, but is that good for traditional television? Does that suggest, you know, if you want to need to be engaging in the interactive component, that you've got to have that. Maybe the second screen is the television.
Right. Yeah. I think it's great for great storytelling. I think that's what it does, and I think there's going to be ways in which, and you're already starting to see it with Chromecast and Apple Play, with Apple TV. Hulu's got the ability to cast from the app directly up to the screen. We're going to start seeing a lot more of that, because when you do get sucked into a great story, I think people sitting on their couches with the big screen there, all of a sudden say, you know what, wow, this is really cool. I want to watch this on my TV, cast it up, and then start conversing on their mobile devices, connecting with community. And that's really what the big aspect of social TV is about, is having that shared emotional connection with the other people in the audience as well, and being able to participate in how fandom comes alive across multiple platforms. I think that's really where television is starting to evolve and merge social, digital, linear, all converging into what is now, I guess, what you call television.
Or premium video content.
Or premium video content.
Some might call it that, yeah. Back to our upfront discussion. So take me through in a practical sense.
Sure.
When you're at and you've been involved in a number of different programs and with different clients, sort of how you take into account the need for that fandom socialization at an early stage of the content development.
Sure. A great example that I can give off the cuff here is working with one of our current clients now. They contracted us to come up with big ideas that they can go pitch at Upfront. And this was back in October, so last year. So a long planning cycle in which they're trying to really understand, what's a great content opportunity we can bring to market around our slate of shows going into the Upfront season. So from our standpoint, in order to come up with great, compelling content experience that can live on digital or can live on social or can live, concurrently across all of them, it's all about understanding audience. We went through an exercise and actually brought this client through the exercise of how we understood who their audience is, what their audience is engaging with in regards to types of content, types of conversation, and then really canvassed both digital as well as social platforms to figure out, great, what is the psychographic makeup of your audience? Where are those tribes of superfans actually aggregating and congregating on platforms, and what is it that they're actually talking about and creating? The whole point of this really is to create not only engaging story world experience for audience, but also at the end of the day, they've got to make money. The networks have to make money. So this is also something and an opportunity in which we're looking at ways to integrate a brand into this story world creation that happens across screens. So we go through our process really to help inform and educate not just the sales marketing teams that are going out to pitch this, but also the content teams that are going to be coming up with the content experiences that go to market. And so we do a deep research analysis that really pulls in insights across Facebook and Twitter and Tumblr, all the major properties in which fans are aggregating and talking about shows. And then we're using different data to get insights on the topics they're discussing. There is rich data when you can start tapping into Facebook and Facebook graph data, their topics insights. Same thing with Twitter. Twitter actually has a great deal of audience insights when you tap into their API for that. When you get into Tumblr and start looking into rabid fan bases creating memes and the different types of content they're creating there, you start to really understand how you can leverage yourself and hit yourself to these rabid fan bases that become the best marketing vehicle of all time for your brand. And when you can do that properly, that is really what I think a brand helps look for. It's not just about an integration or an add into the show.
Right.
They really want that rabid fan base to take a great piece of creative that happens to have their brand integrated into it and then just blow it up across the entire web and social. And so we spend a great deal of time trying to make sure that we're crafting those right stories and insights, and then educating our clients on how we did that, and then enabling them and empowering them to go do it on their own.
Is there, what's the reaction or kind of thought process you see from the content producers, the creatives, you know, in the news business, there's always the church and state, right? And we try, you know, the people reporting the news, and then I don't want to know what the ad sales guys are selling on the other side. To some extent, there was almost church and state around entertainment too, which is, hey, I'm the creative guy, you know, I'm not going to worry about the selling part. But so are the creatives, do you see an embrace of the kind of stuff you're talking about? Is it a resentment, like, hey, look, I know how to, you know, tell stories and write, et cetera, so, you know, you worry about marketing it, but I'm going to make my show. You know, tell me what maybe some of the, it's probably a continuum, but what kinds of stuff do you see?
So that's a loaded question, because there's a little bit of
We're not in a courtroom. I'm allowed to ask loaded questions. So.
A little bit of both, depending on who you're engaging with, really. You know, through 9 years at NBC Universal, you know, working alongside the showrunners, you know, helping to showcase the power of social and audience insights, there were a lot of writers that embraced those insights. And while it didn't, you know, directly tie into their baby, which is, you know, out of their mind, the creative juices that really drove the show, over time, it slowly started to inform some of the ideas that came out of what they were doing. So I think that there are definitely creators out there that are very, very true to their art form, and, you know, have blockers on it, don't want to hear this. But there's also people that are embracing it left and right. And it's really interesting to see the evolution of creating art in the world of today, in which, you know, everyone talks about data informing art and art informing data and the fine balance, you know, what's too much. And it really is, at the end of the day, up to those creators to either embrace some of it, take it in, and then dictate how this all comes to life. You know, we actually saw a lot of support from our creators and showrunners at USA Network when I was there. Really appreciative, I think, of the marketing team's ability to provide all this deep, rich insight on, you know, who is the audience, what are they really caring about, and, you know, it did help, I think, change the course of some of the scripting of the shows. You know, whether a character, you know, died or stayed alive. You know, certain aspects of certain shows, you know, Suits was such a fantastic show, and being able to find comedic points in which fan base gravitated towards Louis Litt in ways that were never seen before, how did that impact his character development for the rest of the series? You know, all that data informing the showrunners, I think it did help drive his character coming to light as more of a main forward kind of fan favorite within the show. So it's really interesting to see it not just at the major media companies, but also at, you know, Maker and Full Screen and all these new studios and the way that they're informing content.
So you had a couple of pretty high profile and successful, call them social TV marketing, you know, campaigns. One of them known as #Killer. Talk a little bit about what #Killer was, and also I'm interested in, because you just mentioned Maker and others, can that work, something like that still work when you don't have kind of a big traditional network to be able to leverage?
Yeah, so #Killer was, in the early days, you know, we conceived it back in 2009, 2010, what they call a transmedia experience. And so through years of working with the psych team, we identified a rabid fan base that called themselves psychos. And they loved and they just had a voracious appetite for any piece of content that came out, any insight, and they really wanted to become part of the story and engage with the characters. You know, Twitter was just really starting to get leveraged a lot with all the television networks at this time, and you had just this rabid fan base that would engage with the show, with the characters all the time, and try to have dialogue and conversation. So, you know, coming out of South by Southwest in I think 2010, you know, we were on stage. I was on stage with the show creators, with Dule Hill, and at one point during the conversation, Dule had literally joined Twitter the day before the event at South by Southwest, and he immediately had 25,000 fans. You know, that's because he's an actor.
Yeah.
And I was sitting right next to Dule, and Dule and I were sitting there joking about stuff we could do. You know, we were trying to punk each other on stage, and I lean over to Dule. I'm like, hey, Dule, why don't you tweet out, you know, something to get the audience, because there was about 1,000 people in the audience, to engage with you in real time. and he did it. And I didn't know what he tweeted out because I was sitting there on stage with him. But what he tweeted out was anytime Jessie opens his mouth to answer a question, somebody jump up and yell and interrupt him. And so the next 5 minutes later, I open my mouth and some girl just jumps up and starts screaming. And I'm like, he starts cracking up. But it was, I think for the whole team, we were like, that's the power of social. Interacting with something that's happening in the real world, and it literally, she interrupted the flow, but it was great, and he's just cracking up, and he explained what had happened. So coming right out of this, we were like, it'd be really amazing if we could actually develop an experience that invited fans to come in and participate and drive the outcome of where this transmedia experience went. So we worked with the show writers to craft a narrative that literally was a branching narrative that was a murder mystery, but it invited fans to come in and participate and engage directly with the main characters every single day. So nonstop, they can come in and send messages back and forth, and it was across Facebook and Twitter and the core destination that we built. But it was a murder mystery branching narrative that allowed you to basically solve the crime alongside the main characters of the show. So it was the first time that our real fan base was really participating in an episode of Psych. And it was called #Killer. It was a massive success. Over 700,000 fans came in, spending 18 minutes on average, and it lasted for 7 weeks long. So we utilized the power of the show and the fan base to help drive this massive engagement pool of fans to help solve a mystery alongside the show writers. And for us, it was a big success because it drove a few other executions. Suits Recruits was a spin-off of that we transposed over to another show. But it was I think a little bit groundbreaking for the industry because it was so forward-thinking in how we were getting audience to really participate in the narrative arc of a show, utilizing air, digital platform, and social all together to drive an outcome.
And is there much evidence, did you see much evidence in that or other work you've done that this is one of those, what people hope for desperately around the television business, that in measuring or seeing a higher level of social activity, it actually will drive audience?
Yeah.
Did you see drive television audience?
We did. Yeah, we did actually. Yeah. And I don't remember the exact numbers offhand, but I seem to remember that the fact that we launched it 6 weeks leading up to the new series premiere. The series premiered to ratings I think were 10% up across the demos. And Psych, I think Psych lasted for a very long time on USA, and it was one of the few shows where you actually saw audience ratings go up over the last few years. And so, we like to think that our tactics utilizing digital and social really helped retain and grow audience because, again, it's harnessing the power of those brand ambassadors and having them be your strongest marketing entity. At the end of the day, the show did end, but it was a great story because in the last few years, it was pretty much social, digital, and USA's own air that was doing most of the marketing for the entire show, and it was the fans, it was the audience that was doing the biggest, heaviest lifting of marketing for the show.
On the social TV, or sort of one last social TV particular question, when the phenomenon first began, we had some apps that got a lot of attention. Get Glue, what was ZBox, became Beamly, etc. And there's much less buzz, no pun intended, about those particular platforms. What's your sense? Is Twitter and Facebook are now kind of so much more diversified and established in a sense. Are they just the suns that have blotted out the other planets in that area? Are there still opportunities for different platforms in the social media space?
Yeah, it's funny because essentially you have these niche players that come to market and they attract certain types of users. And marketers, when they were trying to figure out, what's going to be really important and impactful to my marketing and to audience engagement, we were trying everything. Literally, I tried everything, from Get Glue to ZBox and whatnot. And at the end of the day, we got to a point where what we would start doing is creating a content experience that would live within our own domain on USA and in the USA apps, and we'd syndicate it out in the same way that we discussed earlier about AOL and their massive syndication, play, we would just start syndicating out to Shazam and GetGlue and Beamly or ZBox at the time, and Facebook and Twitter, because of the production process in which we knew that it was going to be impossible to create content specifically for all these different platforms at all times and really be able to drive meaningful experience for our fans. We just didn't have the bandwidth. So at the time, again, Facebook wasn't at a point in which they were driving. There was no video really on Facebook. There was no native video player on Facebook, or even really Twitter for that matter. It was more of an ad platform with Twitter Amplify. So your content experiences within those streams is pretty limited. And while they were still massively powerful in how you're using them as marketing entities, at the end of the day, when you looked at unique people on Twitter engaging with these types of experiences, it was still pretty small. So, Psych, again, another great example, we would have 40,000 concurrent people or so engaging in the Psych second screen experience, mostly driven by people coming to the USA app or site to engage in that experience. A very small amount were on Twitter, a very small amount on Shazam and others. And it's because people, the fans, knew that USA was the home for a great Psych experience, so they went there to engage. And there's something really powerful about that. And so while the numbers of Twitter seemed pretty big, because you can talk about the possible reach that these tweets were reaching. The fact that you put out one post and they look at your followers and look at your followers' followers and say, oh, it's got the potential for 6 million people to reach it, but it's flying by in the stream, and who actually really gets to see it and engage with it? So you kind of have to handicap that a little bit. On the site, USA site, you didn't really have to experience with that. It was one pure experience about Psych and the Psych fandom and the content around that. So, lo and behold, we fast forward to now, I think that, Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, and other platforms, now even Snapchat and others, have a very rich content experience within the stream. So it's getting much harder to get people to come back to your core. And they're incentivizing. I mean, Facebook literally incentivizing people to stay within the stream. Instant articles saying, hey, if you if you sell these things yourself, you get 100% of the revenue. If we sell them, we'll get 70% of the revenue. But we're going to allow you to do great, rich articles, great video. We're going to give you all the data on who's coming and engaging. There's something to be said about that. They have massive scale.
We've talked a lot about, obviously, social TV. Talk to me a little bit about your entrepreneurial venture in creating or co-founding Brave Ventures, kind of what it is, and what you guys are trying to do, and it obviously goes beyond social TV, and give me a sense of kind of some of the other stuff you're working on.
It does. So Brave Ventures is a strategic advisory firm that was really built to help brands as well as media companies deal with, cope with, plan for, and help lead the TV evolution and revolution that we see happening. And that really involves, like you said, premium video and storytelling, but what is television today and what is television tomorrow, and how do you develop the best content experience, the best strategy to engage audience, and then monetize that and drive meaningful impact to your bottom line. So out of the years that I spent at NBC Universal, my partner David Beck, who was the GM of social media at Univision for 6 years or so, and came out of the office of the CEO. And then our third partner is this gentleman named Gary Vaynerchuk, very well known in the social media space.
Only known to people who use the internet.
Yes.
If you have never been on the internet, you would not know Gary Vaynerchuk's name. But,
and we were looking at this paradigm and being within media networks, looking at the power of second screen and social TV and the emergence of OTT and Hulu and Amazon and Netflix. We literally said to ourselves, it's going to get ugly, and it's going to get really ugly before it gets better. So how can we help other media companies and brands that want to become storytellers themselves plan for this future? And so we literally set out and launched in August of 2014 and launched Brave Ventures. And part of the company is focused in working with those brands and publishers to help plan for that future. And the other part of the business is actually investing in companies that we think are going to be the great platforms, technology offerings, content experiences that are going to help shape that future as well. So we're part advisory firm, part incubator and investment opportunity that is literally trying to think about what the next big media companies and production production houses of the future can really look like.
Great. Well, with that, Jessie, thank you. The time flew by, but appreciate you being here. And thank you for joining us this evening on CITI Media Reporter. I'm Howard Homanoff. Good night.